Hello and welcome to Shareware episode 39. I'm Josh and I'm joined by
Greyson.
And nobody else, because Brent is sick today, actually.
Yep, he just doesn't care about having a good podcast. He just wants to be sick all the time.
Yeah, it's his favorite hobby. He pretends to be into video games, but his true passion is destroying his own body from the inside out.
Classic Brett.
Yep. What are you going to do? Each host brings their own topic, and every episode ends with a game club where you all play along. This week's game club is Max Payne 3, in which we play through Chapter 10. It's Shoot or Drive, Sister. I know I said the title wrong. It's Drive or Shoot, Sister. Grayson's giving me the biggest grin. He's trying to be quiet so that it doesn't ruin the flow, but
it's too late.
It's too late.
It's too late already.
I can't continue my flow when Greyson has this jack-o'-lantern face on. So, well, there it is. Timestamps for each of the segments can be found in the show notes. So, Greyson, other than this giant grin, what do you have for us?
I played through Pony Island this week. It's one of the few games that I've finished, and I managed to finish it in one sitting, so that's a unique thing for me.
Yeah, you don't actually finish that many games, period, which is weird.
I play a lot of games.
You play a little bit of a lot of games.
Yes.
And then,
I play a lot of a few games.
Yeah, Europa Universalis, Dota,
Elite.
Oh, yeah.
And XCOM.
Would Dominion...
No.
No? Okay.
Got less than 60 hours.
Oh, okay. Doesn't make the cut. Fair enough. This week, I'm going to be talking about Sanctuary RPG Black Edition, which is a little... What?
Nothing. I just think you're being a little exclusive.
Wow. Okay. We're going there. I actually don't know why it's called Black Edition. I mean, obviously, it's like a re-release.
Yeah, and it's a good color.
But it is. I mean, it is most of the color palette of the game. It's a roguelike, I guess I would say, and it's ASCII art, but it doesn't do the typical roguelike thing of the top-down simultaneous turn-based combat. It instead uses your typical JRPG like menu system of selecting your movesets and that kind of thing. The interesting thing it does, though, is the order in which you pick your moves determines the effects of them, and you end up like trying to link them together into combos. So if you pick a given ability and then change the order you're using them in, each one of them might have like debuffs or changes in the amount of mana it costs or damage it does and that kind of thing. And then ideally you want to close a combo out with your finisher move that like it's the most pronounced effect of all of them. The problem is the entire time you're fighting your opponent, there's they'll have various moves that have like tells, and you have to use evasive maneuvers on some of the bigger ones. So you'll get warnings like, oh, the enemy, like the wolf is about to charge you and that kind of thing. So you have 2 turns to continue your combo. But you can't close your combo because the only way you get a reposition ability is by reactivating one of the abilities you've already used in your current combo.
So this is turn-based combat?
Yeah, it's turn-based. You pick your move, and then all of the actions of you and the enemy are resolved and displayed to you.
Alright, and is it free-to-play?
It's not free to play, but it's damn near close, especially right now. Normally the game is like $3. It's 75 cents right now on the Steam sale.
With the winter sale?
Yeah, winter sale just started, was it yesterday or today?
Yesterday.
Yesterday, and it'll be going for another handful of days, I imagine, at least through Christmas, I have to expect. So if you're listening to this around release, if you have 3/4 and you're even remotely into turn-based role-playing combat, you got no excuse. It's 75 cents. Come on.
So let's see. It's turn-based. That doesn't really work very well for me because I get impatient and I give no thought to my decisions.
Yeah, that is actually the one thing that I have happen to me is there's kind of a discrepancy in the difficulty of fights. Often, if you're like fighting, the structure is interesting. It's super linear. Like you don't, cause like in between fights, you're not moving a character around. You just always have a menu of like, here are the various spots in town you can visit, and then you can either roam around in the current area, just like fight random enemies, or continue your objective. And if you're just roaming around and fighting average enemies, most of the time the combat encounters are really easy to get through. And you can just honestly kind of like mash the 1 through 3 keys, because those are your various attacks, and get through them. But you have to very quickly reassess if an enemy is actually posing a significant threat, and then actually put your thinking cap on, because you will get stopped if you try to handle like a story-relevant fight in the same way that you handle like random encounters.
So that's discrepancy in difficulty, something I encounter a lot in Dwarf Fortress Adventure Mode.
Yeah.
Where like you can go through a whole horde of goblins until one gets a lucky shot at you in the head with a hammer and you're unconscious, and then they just kind of kick you to death.
Yeah, the adventure mode is much more of a traditional roguelike, am I right?
Right.
Okay, because I never played that much Dwarf Fortress, but like I feel like the iconic aspect of it has always been like the almost like management sim sort of stuff.
Not anymore.
Yeah?
It's really switched over.
Okay. So is adventure mode a more recent mode, or has the development just refocused onto it?
It's gotten the majority of the improvements lately. The world now lives while you're in adventure mode. Okay. So people live, die, get born.
Can you have a world... What is the other mode called, actually?
Fortress mode.
Fortress mode, that's kind of like the management sort of stuff.
Yes, and now you can leave your fortress alone and go do an adventure without...
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
Back.
So you can have one congruent world that you're interacting with in multiple ways.
Yes.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I feel like that like kind of random difficulty spike thing is sort of a holdover from the old days of roguelikes, and on one hand, it kind of keeps in line with the like element of randomness that they always try to leverage, which gives it replayability and excitement oftentimes, because you can kind of like get into a groove and suddenly you're thrust into a situation that you weren't expecting. On the other hand, for this game specifically, because the combat system is so unlike anything else I've played in a turn-based role-playing game, I kind of feel like it's a little bit to the game's detriment. Like, I wish that I was being more consistently tested in my ability to assess like what order I should be doing my combos in, because like I said, you can kind of fall into a rut where you're just kind of mashing, and then you get punished so quickly for doing that in situations where you're actually being challenged by the enemies that it's kind of like going from 60 to 0 on a dime. Like, I've definitely had like a run going where I was pretty sure that there was no way I was going to get bested by any enemies I was fighting at that given level, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere I like lose half my health in one turn, and it like really jars you.
So is there leveling in this?
Yeah, it has a lot of the systems are pretty traditional in terms of character progression. Like, you have weapon masteries that you gain as you level. You just invest points in like being better with maces or swords or axes, etc. And then your attributes, it's pretty typical D&D, wisdom, int, dex, strength, etc. The cool thing is, when you invest into an attribute enough, you end up getting like these late game perks where like if your vitality is really high, I think I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but let's just say for the purpose of articulating that, like, for every 10 points you put into vitality, which increases your health, you then get a 1% chance to restore a quarter of your health on attacking. So, like, investing really deeply into an attribute will give you enough of a chance to trigger these perks that it ends up becoming like a core part of your build.
So you get like Fallout-style perks?
It's not as overt in the way you pick them as in Fallout, because in Fallout you kind of like you get enough of an attribute to like unlock a perk, but you're still picking specific ones from a menu. And here it's like once you've reached X number of points in something, it's just granted to you, and you might not even necessarily know what the options are as you're going. It seems like it's something that you kind of like stumble into different builds as you continue to replay. But it's cool because there's a good variety of like the character customization is almost like evocative of Elder Scrolls. Like you're picking your race and your background and class, and then you're also picking gender and body type. Like you can choose if you're like really slender and short, or you could be like rotund or somewhere in the middle.
Are there advantages that go with those?
Yeah, it seems like they have like minor stat adjustments to like evasion versus like chance to hit and that kind of thing.
That's really cool. That's something Dragon's Dogma did.
Yeah, didn't the body types like determine carry weight and that kind of thing
Yes,
too?
and if you were small enough, you could be thrown by other characters and access areas that nobody else could get into.
Yeah, it's a really interesting system, especially in a game like Dragon's Dogma, where like there's so much physicality to the combat with like climbing and grappling and, like you said, being thrown, where like it makes sense to really accentuate the size of your character as something that fluctuates or something that you decide early on.
And if you're a big enough dude, you're just huge.
Yeah.
Like you will tower over everybody else.
Do you have fat rolls in that game?
No. There are no fat rolls.
Are there rolls at all in Dragon's Dogma? I forget. I only played like a few hours.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I know there's like an overweight walk.
Okay. That's pretty good. Yeah, this game pretty much cuts out any fluff whatsoever. There's no walking whatsoever. You're literally just looking at a menu on the bottom half of the screen and then like a ASCII rendering of the environment up top. They do kind of do an interesting thing with it though. I can't say I've ever seen a mechanic like this outside of literally just like those I Spy games, but there are occasionally icons in the environments. Like I think it's specifically like X and one other character. If you see an X anywhere in the environment and you press X, you get like a golden XP bonus just for like paying attention to the screen. It's really weird. They don't really have like a lore explanation for it. It's just like, hey, thanks for looking at my ASCII art almost. Which is kind of like congruent with the tone of the game overall. It's very, I guess I would say flippant with its, like, seriousness. Sometimes it's, like, typical grimdark fantasy, and then it gets very meta, and we'll just, like, talk about things in, like, almost a Kojima-esque way of, like, referencing buttons and stuff. But it's, like, characters canonically discussing the buttons.
Okay.
Yeah, the game definitely, like, tries to hammer home its sense of humor pretty often. And I would say that's to fluctuating levels of success. Like, there are some times where it'll get a good chuckle out of me, and other times where I'm just, like, rolling my eyes or groaning.
So, the writer, is it written by one guy?
From what I understand, I think this game might be entirely designed by one person, but I'm not positive, actually. And it looked like this might be the only game by the studio name that's out. Other than there was an original version, and then I'm playing Black Edition, but I don't even honestly know what that has changed. Presumably, like, more content of the campaign, more items and stuff.
Okay. So he's just kind of changed his mood as he's writing constantly?
I don't know if it's that so much as, like, it's maybe it's meant to be rooted in a like serious fantasy tone, so that when they then lampoon it, it's like they have something to riff off of. Like it almost feels like they put like serious fantasy lore in so that they can make jokes at its own expense.
Okay.
Like the first boss ends up being this robot terminal that is it looks actually a lot like Mettaton. I don't know. Did you ever play Undertale?
No, I never finished it.
Okay, did you get far enough to meet Mettaton?
Nope.
Oh, okay, you really didn't get very far. Okay, well, it basically looks like this robotic box with a face, more or less. And it's basically just, like, making technobabble assessments of your abilities and stuff while it tries to destroy you. And this is, like, sandwiched in between fighting, like, walking skeletons and wyverns and stuff like that. Like, okay. It's apropos of nothing. And then you end up, when you destroy it, you take back its remnants to the blacksmith, who has been kind of like guiding you along up to until this point. And you're asking him questions like, what do I do? And then he just like pulls off a panel on it, and it has like it has like an industrial print section where it's like saying that like this robot was forged in such and such city, and it's like, okay, I guess I'm going there. It's very whimsical and nonsensical all the time. And the nice thing is, like, because it's so streamlined, you can completely ignore the writing if it doesn't do anything for you. Like, it's really easy to just double down in the combat of this, and just, like, hash out fights and continue to progress through the boss fights, and the story at large. Which I would say is like a valid way to play the game, because it's an interesting enough system to stand on its own. And they like do lots of interesting twists on it as well. Like, there's pretty much every enemy has some form of an attack that they like telegraph, and you have to dodge at certain points, like I mentioned. But there's some other additional layers, like the robot has this like lock-on meter that's being filled up as you go. So not only do you have to dodge when you normally would in a combat encounter, but if you're not consistently dodging, just to like take the edge off of the lock system, it'll eventually launch a missile that I'm pretty sure one hit kills you. So you're kind of managing this additional meter outside of your health and the enemies. And it seems like that's kind of a thing they're going to continue to do, of like adding in additional systems with the boss fights.
So would you say it's kind of like Undertale in the writing?
I would actually say it's a little reminiscent of some of the early sections of Undertale in terms of its sense of humor, but I would not put it anywhere near the same league of quality.
Okay. So spaghetti jokes?
Yeah, now and again, sure. Stuff in that vein. Honestly, I would say that the main thing you're going to want out of it is the progression systems. If you're... I don't know. Maybe this will appeal to some people. I mean, sense of humor is extremely subjective, so I'm not going to write it off on that alone, I guess. But, I mean, like I said, 75 cents, it's not like you really got shafted if it ends up not tripping your trigger in terms of the writing.
So those are your closing statements on it?
I guess other than that, just like, it's got... it definitely feels like a game that's made by one person, because it has a weird breadth to its ideas. There's also like there's almost like management sim stuff where like you can own the tavern and like stock booze and sell it to people to make a profit, and like talk with the locals that are at your tavern, or like build an encampment where you mine for ore so you can get mats to craft new weapons and stuff.
And are these things worth doing and entertaining?
I wouldn't say they're entertaining in and of themselves, because one, I'm not really a management sim kind of guy, so I'm not really the kind of person that would appeal to in the first place. But also, it doesn't seem like there's a ton of depth to the systems in and of themselves, but the way they feed back into the character progression means that they probably will be worth like dabbling in, just so you have more materials to craft things. And like, I'm sure talking to some of the NPCs could lead to like side quests and that kind of thing. So I'm sure it's something that develops into something more fruitful later on. But by and large, I would just say, like, if you want to check out something with a really novel combat system that maybe will like kind of tweak the way you think about JRPG combat and maybe even make you laugh a couple times, then definitely check it out.
Would you say that if you're willing to pony up 75 cents, it's worth checking out?
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that phrasing, but I can't imagine where you're going with this.
Well, I bring up ponies because of Pony Island.
Ah, so clever. If Brent here, he'd probably have a smack on the back of the head by now.
Hey, that was a pretty decent one. It was really forced, but if it wasn't, it would have been applaudable.
I won't fault you at all.
So, Pony Island is it's an arcade game where you have a pony, mm-hmm. and you jump over pony, what are they called? Gates. Mm-hmm. And if you are interested in playing the game and don't want spoilers, you should skip ahead right now.
I would say, okay, if you want a small amount of spoilers, because that description basically tells you nothing, I would say that if you liked the Stanley Parable, you should check this game out.
Yeah, that's appropriate.
Yeah, that's as much as I will say. If you're into that kind of game that kind of maybe like toys with the fourth wall and that kind of thing, and then your expectations of like what a video game is going to say to the player and that kind of thing, give it a look. It's how much is Pony Island?
It is $5 when it's not on sale.
Yeah, that's another really cheap one. So
cheap games getting done quick today.
Mm-hmm. All right, expand.
Okay. So, Pony Island is a game where you are forced to play an arcade game where you jump a pony over gates. Mm-hmm. And it turns out it's run by the devil. And that you are a crusader from the year 1200, and you and all your crusader buddies' souls are trapped in this arcade game. Mm-hmm. And there's another force that is trying to help you escape. And the whole time you're trying to collect secret pony tickets.
Yeah, it's one of those games that takes like a hard left turn really quickly. Actually, I would say another touchstone would maybe even be like Frog Fractions, because it has that layer of like presenting itself as a very simple, almost like childish game, and then quickly the veneer is removed. And
also, you learn a little bit of programming.
Yeah, there's definitely like
the puzzles are programming, but they're simple enough that you wouldn't think of them as it.
Yeah, it like phrases the puzzles in the way that programming logic is phrased, but like the actual minutia of what you're doing isn't nearly as complex as actual coding.
It is not as difficult as Uplink.
No, it's not even as difficult as like Human Resource Machine, which
that's a challenge in the later stages.
I remember Brent talking about that. Like it was actually like back in summer on the show, and that's like a much more literal kind of metaphor for coding. But this just kind of like takes some of the elements of just like trains of logic and presents them in a way that is like has a computery aesthetic. But they're not extremely challenging. Like they're things that a lot of people can intuit.
I think I only had trouble on one of them, and it was after things started getting split.
Yeah, it definitely isn't something that you'll just breeze through. Like you'll probably have to think about stuff for a little while, but I never had to like go look at a guide or anything, which is kind of like my barometer for when it's like, okay, this is maybe a bit much.
It's not Antechamber.
Yeah, man. How far did you end up getting through Antechamber?
I don't remember, but I really enjoy the non-Euclidean aspect.
Yeah, that was super cool. It just ended up getting so obtuse, and just like even navigating the map was difficult.
And the fact that you're on a timer the whole time just kind of ruins it.
Yeah, I think I only ended up getting like 20% of the way through that game, if that.
I probably missed a lot. Mm-hmm. But Pony Island has... I like that it gives you the mechanics piece by piece.
Yeah, it does a good job of introducing stuff to you. And I would say that carries over into the narrative as well. Like, it has a similar cadence to how you're like kind of uncovering elements of the conspiracy, I guess I would describe it as.
When you played, did you get the alternate costume?
I don't think I
did. In adventure mode?
No.
You can get a coin, and then you can get a ride from the boatman on the River Styx, and you become a crusader in adventure mode instead of a pony.
Interesting. Yeah, I liked that it was the kind of game where they set up like a very rigid set of boundaries in terms of like what ways you can interact with the game in, and then it defies them in pretty fun ways. Like it feels like it almost felt like the game was kind of like constantly trying to one up itself in terms of like breaking its own rules, which was kind of cool. There's one moment in particular that like I don't feel like we should talk about. I'll say it's like the UI stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That is like extremely cool, and I've never seen any other game do anything remotely like it. And I think that moment alone was worth the asking price. It's the kind of thing where like
it's a boss fight. Right.
Yeah, it is. It's the kind of thing where it makes me feel bad for people who might have like been exposed to the game through a Let's Play. Like the difference between experiencing that firsthand and watching somebody do it is so profound. Like, I'm not going to say it was like a life-changing moment, but it was just like, wow, that was really fucking clever.
Did you like the switch to Louis and like Happy Pony Island mode?
Yeah. It just like changing up the tone and art style really harshly.
And the You Killed Jesus.
Yep. Yeah, that was a really cool game. I think it it originally was like a Flash game, like it's something that was played in a browser, and then the designer ended up like fleshing it out and putting it into that $5 Steam package. Which I'm glad they did, because it's well worth the money. Like, it's a very, very clever, creative game.
I feel like I was missing something the whole time. Like, a second playthrough could yield a completely different ending. You know how the demons are like, you're being deceived the whole time?
Yeah.
I feel like if you went along with them, you'd get a different ending, but I don't know how you'd go along with them.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those games that, like, has so much, like, alludes to so many layers of deception that you can't really tell when you've peeled away the last one and you, like, actually understand what's going on. I don't actually know if that game has, like, alternate endings or anything, but I know there's definitely a lot of, like, hidden side content, because the ticket collection, which is, like...
visions.
Yeah, it's, like, kind of your metric. Oh, yeah, I forgot about those weird visions. That's kind of like your metric for progression, and I think I only ended up having, like, half of them or something
like that. I got, like, 5.
Yeah, they're really hard to get.
And I was looking for them.
Yeah, well, because, like, if... It doesn't even really... I'm not super into, like, collecting shit in most games.
But there's
like
only 24.
Yeah, well, and it's also, like, that's kind of the appeal of that game. Where it's almost kind of like, I don't know, in a sense it's, like, similar to, like, Banjo-Kazooie, where it's like, if you're not collecting shit in Banjo-Kazooie, what are you doing? Like, in this game, like, trying to poke and prod at all the, like, the seams of it and figure out the extent of what you can do is, like, the joy of it. So it did end up compelling me to look for stuff, but yeah, I couldn't get very far.
It breaks the fourth wall a lot.
Yeah.
And it honestly feels kind of like you could get motion sickness playing.
Yeah, and it also just has, like, almost, I wouldn't say disturbing, but just, like, kind of like an unsettling art style for much of the time. Like, it makes extensive use of, like, kind of like CRT effects and that kind of thing.
Like the grime on the screen.
Yeah, you're actually, it's weird. The aesthetic of the game is, there's, like, on your computer monitor, there is an old computer monitor, and then in that computer monitor is the game.
And it's got bubble glass, so there's a little bit of distortion on the edges, and there's stuff behind the bezel of the screen.
Yeah, there's a lot of great attention to detail and little stuff like that. I thought it was a really interesting presentation.
It's got a lot of the tone of The Binding of Isaac meets Stanley Parable.
Yeah, the Binding of Isaac's a good touchstone. Not just because of the like the religious overtones, but even just like sometimes the sense of humor and that kind of thing. That's the other thing. Yeah. The game's fairly funny now and again. Like, yeah. It's that's talking about games like falling flat when it comes to comedy. Like, I would say Pony Island succeeds more often than it fails. And if it fails, it was never like, I never was cringing at it. It was at most just like maybe didn't land super well.
It's a good time.
Yeah.
It's worth $5. I bet it's on sale this Christmas.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw it at like $3 or something like that. It's really good as like a way to just spend a night. Like, just carve out like 3 or 4 hours for it.
It's not a long game at all. It's not extremely challenging. You
can get through it. Like, a normal person could beat it on their first time in just like a couple hours, but depending on how much you're poking around in it, it can extend it. But it's not something that you're going to put dozens of hours into. You could totally get a full experience out of it in one sitting. Like, I haven't gone back to it since I finished it.
Yeah, I didn't feel... It told me to uninstall it, and I uninstalled it, and I think there might be more if I were to reinstall it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I definitely... I walked away from the ending just being like, yeah, okay, cool.
Alright, I think we've exhausted Pony Island, and it's time to take a quick break, and then we'll get to the game club.
Yeah, before that, though, just a quick reminder about Brett's email giveaway. Remember, he has a copy of Uplink, If you write into sharewarepodcast@gmail.com with thoughts on one of our segments from the show, thoughts on the game club, something new you'd want to talk about, send it in. You could win a free copy of the infamous hacker game.
Uplink.
Yeah.
It's a good time. Last week, I don't think we mentioned it because we got distracted by Brent.
Yep.
He had an excellent email about 80s games.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Brett is eligible to win because he's a Shareware alum.
Also because he already has the copy. He's trying to give it away, so...
I mean, yeah, I guess. You can't have too many copies of Uplink. What if the government seizes your computer and you need another copy?
I guess you could just, have a computer bank full of PCs running Uplink and then fill the IRC channels and then just, invite a bunch of people over to roleplay.
Yeah, and... you'd look really cool having all those blue monitors, and you could...
Keep the lights dim and just have the glow of the monitor. And
the song.
Mm-hmm.
The song's Digital
Dreams. All right, well, in lieu of Digital Dreams, we'll have to settle for painkiller adult ones.
Yeah, Max is not having a good time this week, and we'll get to that after the break.
Eu vim devolver o seu sorriso favela. Leve e solta pra cantar. Nunca esquecer como sua paz é bela. Dá força pra continuar. Eu vim devolver o seu sorriso favela. Leve e solta pra cantar. Nunca esquecer como sua paz é bela. Dá força pra continuar. E eles tentam te convencer que sua sina é sofrer, vendo seus filhos morrer. Não, eu posso entender que pelas esquinas ver suas lágrimas correr e acabar sua fé, vendo homens, barracos e morros sem socorro num lugar sem esperança, nada, sem luz que possa inspirar. Resta buscar o melhor pra construir seu lar, e esse sorriso lindo é o que vai libertar. Eu vim devolver o seu sorriso favela, leve e solta pra cantar. Nunca esquecer como sua paz é bela. Dá força pra continuar. Eu vim devolver o seu sorriso favela, leve e solta pra cantar. Nunca esquecer como sua paz é bela. Dá força pra continuar. Eles querem te ver chorar e desacreditar que pode conquistar ao pensar. Jamais sua cara é lutar, vencer e prosperar, correr e alcançar, mostrar que é capaz. Pois nós tem o sol, o calor, tem os gritos na feira, o futebol, as minas e os banhos de mangueira, as crianças felizes. Só o dinheiro é pouco, mas lembre-se, nada como um dia após o outro. Eu vim devolver o seu sorriso favela, leve e solta pra cantar. Nunca esquecer como sua paz é bela. Dá força pra continuar. Eu vim devolver o seu sorriso favela, leve e solta pra cantar. Nunca esquecer como sua paz é bela. Dá força pra continuar.
Game Club, Game Club, Game Club, Game Club. It's time for a Game Club, Josh. You ready?
It's nice to have all the energy of a three-man podcast condensed into Greyson alone.
So this week we played through Max Payne 3, Chapter 10, It's Drive or Shoot Sister, in which Max's day goes from bad to worse.
Yeah, 4 times over.
We open up with Max drinking a lot, and then...
As he's one to do.
Yeah, and then Raoul comes in and just makes fun of him. He's not a very good friend.
No, this is me continuing to hold my view of Raul I've had up until this point, which is that he's not really that great of a dude. Although he has a couple moments, especially in this section we played. We just ended up letting down Rodrigo pretty horribly.
Yeah, we cannot rescue this man's right for the life of us.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of people who don't want us to rescue his life. Like, hundreds of people who are really against it and know how to shoot a gun.
They're not alcoholics.
Yeah. I actually thought they managed to make Rodrigo fairly sympathetic in this part. Like, he's kind of like lamenting the fact that despite all of his wealth and power, he's not like actually been able to help the people of his country.
Yeah, does a piece of shit feel popular because it's surrounded by flies?
Yeah. I appreciate that he at least acknowledges the fact that most of his rich friends are completely out of touch with society and the plight of the average individual.
And then, so you're in the office getting lambasted for being bad at your job.
Which is fair.
And then Rodrigo's brothers and the cop decide to leave, and immediately after, the Crasha Preto show up and they want to destroy the office.
Yeah, they're done fucking around. They're basically just sieging the castle at this point. And this is kind of where I beg the question, like, why don't they have more than 2 bodyguards? Because it seems like more of a distribution of labor issue than an incompetency issue on Max's part.
Yeah, and Max isn't even in charge of the bodyguards. That's like Passos' job. Max is just there.
Yeah, he's a dude on payroll.
And then the security system doesn't work, and you have to help a nerdy kid get it back online.
Yeah, it's nice to actually have like some normal people to interact with, because so many of the cast are either like aristocrats or like hired killers.
Or just broken people. Like, no one feared death until this point.
Yeah, and you finally have the IT guy and the secretary, both of which are scared shitless. So it kind of like brings you back to center, I feel like. It's just like, oh, okay, here's something to compare it to. Like a normal person in this situation who is just asking the question, what the fuck is going on?
You get the office locked down after a little bit. There's a lot of one-liners in there.
I feel like that goes without saying. It's Max Payne. He's got one-liners from head to toe, pretty much.
He's got a writing staff in his apartment.
Yeah, I feel like most people, like, the amount of time he must spend putting into refining his witty banter has to detract from his ability to practice, like, shooting and that kind of thing at a certain point. But, I mean, somehow he still stays fit and on his A-game.
Yeah, he does stay really fit for a guy that drinks as much as he does and does as little as he does.
Yeah, it's weird because he's, like, constantly, like, jogging and then getting out of breath and, like, yelling for Passos to slow down, and yet he looks like he's probably, like, buffer than Passos.
He looks like a very healthy middle-aged man.
Yeah, you'd think there would be, like, a scene of him in a wife beater, like, benching or something, but you don't really...
There are no montages.
There's no, yeah...
Well, there are. They're just all drinking montages.
Yeah, exactly. There's never anything that alludes to how he manages to stay in decent shape, or at least look like he's in decent shape. But, nonetheless, you end up fighting somebody who's in more preposterous shape than him, this fucking juggernaut of a dude down in the entryway.
Oh yeah, the atrium guy.
Yeah, what the hell was up with that fight? Was I the only one that had difficulties with that?
So, I've never had a problem with that fight.
Really?
You just shoot him in the head until his helmet comes off.
I tried it like 4 times. The first time I tried unloading on his head in slow-mo, and I guess I just burned through my entire slow-mo meter firing an automatic weapon and didn't end up doing enough damage, which was really confusing.
Were you using a rifle?
I think it was probably an SMG.
Okay, I always use a rifle with that guy.
Okay, so it might have just been like the caliber or something like that was the issue. But like, I did that the first time, and then I was like, well, that didn't work, so headshot must not be the way to do it. And I was like, okay, well, he's wearing a helmet. Maybe that's their way of telling me, like, don't bother shooting for the head. So I, like, tried, like, a few different ways. Like, maybe I gotta clip him in the leg. It doesn't look like he has knee pads on or anything. And eventually I just stumbled back into realizing that it was the head. It just took more than I anticipated.
The other thing that always gets me through that is I end up using a last stand. And that, I mean, it's an instant kill on him.
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. I think I must have been out of pills when I got to that point, because I don't even remember getting any last stands at that spot. And there's like 3 other enemies that have the opportunity to knock you down, so... But they're pretty easy pickings.
Yeah, those are just normal guys.
They're not in cover or anything. Like, you definitely have the upper hand in terms of, like, positioning in that area, so... but yeah, this fight distracts Max long enough for an assassin to sneak in and take out Rodrigo, which I love the notion of them both hiring an extremely elusive professional trained killer and an army of goons to both assault the base at once, so that you've got your silent approach and all out guns blazing covered.
And then you go to lament that your boss is killed, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna rescue his wife.
Yeah, I like that when he's like kind of almost huddled over Rodrigo's corpse and notices the picture of Fabiana, he has like this moment of just kind of like a touching declaration of purpose. Like he's like, well, if I can do one thing right, I can save this woman. And he's just like, he's kind of like almost like managed to condense all of his focus and even confidence into like one moment. And then he fucking drops the photo because he's a drunk, bumbling idiot. But that ends up being what saves him, because he like bends down to pick up the picture and there's a piece of C4 under the table. And
the building ends up getting blown up basically, and you wake up in the middle of a fire.
Yeah, this was a much more over-the-top sequence than I was expecting, especially the first time going through this game. Like, obviously, it's a game where you're using, like, bullet time and you're in shootouts all the time and that kind of thing. Like, okay, it's definitely going to be bombastic, but I didn't expect, like, entire buildings blowing up bombastic. This is definitely, like, kind of an escalation of drama.
I think we should stop and acknowledge that Max falls from heights onto his back a lot and experiences no back pain most of the time.
Well, I guess that's what the painkillers are for, in part.
I suppose, yeah.
Bullet wounds and spinal injuries as a result of falling from the second story when it just burns down.
Well, also, he fell into the helipad in our last segment.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's just always just fine.
He's got that cushiony layer of muscle that he's developed around everything. He's just got like a bicep behind his spine. He manages to limp his way through, which, like, it's very Uncharted-esque, actually, because basically all you can do is walk forward and then...
execute guys.
Yeah. I like that they have a few just, like, limping, completely disarmed, guards, or not guards, but the CS.
Yeah.
And Max's first reaction is just like, oh yeah, put a bullet in their head. Just, like, no mercy whatsoever.
Doing them a favor.
In a sense, yeah. Like, some of them were in really bad shape, especially the last guy you meet.
He's got, like, no legs and one arm.
Well, he had one leg, but it looked like it was mangled up, and the other one was gone past the knee. It was not a good scene, but he drags him out of the buildings and interrogates him a little bit. And I appreciate that the guy's just like, we weren't here to kill Rodrigo. We were here for you. You killed, like, 100 of us the other day. Like, it makes perfect sense, because, I mean, even if he's just a henchman, at a certain point, Max is so high profile, at least just, like, based on his accomplishments, it makes sense that he would be on somebody's shit list.
Max is a real jerk.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like they probably didn't, none of them were alive long enough to get to know him as a jerk so much as just a dude that's murderous.
He does kill so many people.
Yeah.
It gets to be a little unrealistic in a game that's, I mean, plot-wise fairly realistic.
I mean, I guess I would say not necessarily realistic, but like it's reserved in some ways. Like it's a more introspective plot than you get out of a lot of action games of this type.
It's not Call of Duty.
Yeah, there's not a ton of globetrotting and that kind of thing, but like the proportions are definitely out of whack in terms of just like how many people he ends up murdering his way through and that kind of thing. Like, it's definitely unrealistic in that sense, but it's like kind of a concession for gameplay. In terms of like the actual beat by beat story, it's not especially ludicrous, and there's definitely a lot of like relatability going on there.
So you interrogate the guy and you find out that Fabiana's in the favela at the top of the hill. Yeah. And this is where the second act really gets started.
Mm-hmm. And it comes alongside a new look for Max.
Yes, he decides to shave his head and get an ugly shirt and sober up.
Yeah, I love his shirt. It's like the most disgusting, like, Technicolor mess of like parrots and tropical flowers and shit. It's like a Hawaiian shirt, but applied to Colombia and way, way more gaudy.
And it goes really well with his holsters.
Yeah, he almost has a bit of a Nathan Drake thing going on.
It's like straps. Dad mode Nathan Drake.
Yeah, kind of. Jaded dad Nathan Drake. It was Uncharted 4 before Uncharted 4 was. Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. I'm not a drunk or a pill addict, so it's foreign to me, but it's weird to me that he kind of like goes on about like now he's getting sober, but he's still popping pills all the fucking time.
Well, he says one vice at a time.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, like, I would imagine the painkillers probably don't reduce his ability to shoot so much and like reason, but it's definitely, I wouldn't say he's strictly sober, which he kind of makes it out to be for a moment, but yeah, he looks completely ridiculous and nothing like the Max we know. Like, he's
normally a leather jacket wearing cop.
Yeah, and now he's pretty much the antithesis. He's still rocking the beard though, which I think
he hasn't shaved since the start of the game.
Yeah, there's pretty good attention to detail because his beard does get longer over the course of it. Like, it's more of like kind of a lumberjack thing by the end of the game.
Did you, like, in the cutscene, what did you think of his haircut? I'm glad they, like, fixed it for actual gameplay.
Oh, where he, like, messes up and there's, like, little mist bits and stuff like that? Yeah, it was pretty funny. I have once or twice considered shaving my head just to see how it went, but I'm always worried that I'll miss something because I live alone, so I don't have anyone to, like, check the back of my head or anything. Also, there's always the gamble of, like, do you have a weird-shaped skull?
Yeah.
And there's not really any way to come back from it. You can just, like, wear a beanie for a while as consolation.
And also, like, when you really shave your head, you kind of give off a vibe of being a dangerous person.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on... Like, the facial hair definitely carries some of that message with it. Like, you could probably go clean-shaven and not look completely monstrous, especially depending on, like, how friendly your resting face is.
Yeah, Max would just look really old if he didn't have the beard.
Yeah, he doesn't have, like, a rage in his eyes on a moment-to-moment basis. It's more just like an emptiness.
Yeah.
But relatable emptiness.
So he's going through this favela, and you follow a lame kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, I know lots of sexy ladies.
Yeah, Max is looking for a tour guide, and he's more than happy to help. Which, like... I guess Max just has, like, no direction at this point. He's just like, it's somewhere in the favela, up the hill-ish, but... Excuse me. I'll just follow any small boy who claims to know where I need to go. So he just kind of tags along.
And you end up at this street party that's a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's just like a grindy rave in a basketball court. And then some armed dudes notice that you're the only white 40-year-old shaven head man.
And they decide to steal your sunglasses and your gun and your watch.
Yeah, he honestly shouldn't have been able to come back from this, and it's kind of surprising they didn't just gun him down, because it seems like in this part of town you can pretty much get away with whatever the fuck you want, but I guess they were feeling generous in that they only completely robbed him.
Yeah, and then you end up in the gutter, even though you're sober.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to walk up and find a phone, and you get yelled at by some people that don't like you.
Yeah, I appreciate that they kind of reintroduce his kind of musings on the class divide from this new perspective. Because up until this point, like, Max, I would say, like, fairly hypocritically kind of roasts all the rich people that he's collecting paychecks from for being out of touch with the poor people of this country, and just kind of, like, muses on, like, how shitty things are for them, but he's still, like, doesn't actually have any connection to it. He's not really seen it for himself. And here he's thrust into the middle of it, and I think he kind of expected maybe not a warm welcome, but kind of like we kind of come from the same sphere. Cause, I mean, Max wasn't especially affluent, even, like, back when he was a working cop, right?
Yeah, he was just living in a New Jersey apartment.
Yeah, like, he's just a dude. So I think in his mind, it was just kind of like, oh yeah, we're simpatico. And then when he shows up in his like,
stupid shirt.
Yeah, his garish shirt and his shaven head with, like, his giant tourist sunglasses, and just asking for a phone, like, mimicking a phone up to his head with his thumb and pinky, and not able to even speak, like, more than 2 words of Spanish. Like, it doesn't go over well.
And so after this point is, like, if you had been meeting Anders Detling, you meet him a second time here. He's actually in the favela giving out vaccinations to kids.
Oh, which one was Anders again?
He's the ex-cop.
Okay, yeah, okay.
He's Happy Max.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Okay, so he's just doing kind of like a charity thing or something.
And his daughter's coming down to help in a week, and his wife's with him, and they're happy. And Max asks if he's got a phone, and he points him up the hill.
Towards the strip club?
Yep.
That's interesting. It's kind of funny that he knows that there's a phone in that strip club.
Hey, man, you gotta know where the phone is.
I guess, yeah. Well, yeah, I found my own way, because I didn't see Anders the first time, but, it goes from seedy to seedier once you enter this place. I like how there's just, like, these dudes, these muscle-bound smokers out front that are just kind of, like, staring daggers into you. And they say something to Max as he walks in, but he doesn't, like, try to stop and figure out what it is. He's just like, yeah, I'm going in.
And it's kind of weird because he's not the only white guy there. And yet he's still getting a lot of hate.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like someone that's trying to look like a tourist. He doesn't actually look like a tourist, is the thing. Like, everybody else is, like, wearing, like, suits, or they've got, like, t-shirt and shorts, whereas Max has this way over the top shirt and the glasses and fucking gun holsters. So I think that might be the thing that's actually probably the linchpin for kind of setting him apart, is the leather gun holsters, which are now empty. So He just looks like a poser at this point.
So you get to the bar, and there's a really unenthusiastic stripper. Like, it's very, very terrible.
Yeah, it's a sad place. I mean, you are going to a strip club at, like, 3 in the afternoon or something. It's not like prime time strip club hours. It's you and, like, maybe the odd customer. There wasn't even anybody at the bar. There were, like, people in the rooms by the front, which, like,
those are the brothel rooms.
Yeah, it's kind of a package deal at this establishment. They're not playing by American rules, we'll say.
Yeah. And then you get approached by a cop from the first chapter.
Yeah, what is his name again?
Dang it. Oh. Should have known this.
We should. It's, Becker? Yeah.
No, Becker's the rich cop. This is, De Silva. It's De Silva.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's, like, piecing together basically everything Max has been up to for the last, like, month or so.
But the thing is, De Silva's been sober for the last month, so he's actually able to do his job.
Yeah, and he's also, like, investigative. He's not just, like, a gun that is sent around. It's kind of interesting to see, like, third-party viewpoints of some of the scenes of, like, he already knows about the exchange at the stadium and that kind of thing. Like, he's in on the situation.
He also riffs on Max a lot for, like, things that are, like, a little fresh.
Yeah.
He picks scabs. Like, he talks about how he wouldn't hire Max as a bodyguard, and Max just is outright fuck you about that.
Yeah, he doesn't beat around the bush, for sure. But still he bought Max a drink, or offered to buy him a drink, so he's good in his book.
Yeah. Just a soda, though, because Max is trying to dry out.
Yeah, what was it? It was just like a seltzer or something like that?
Yeah, he got like a Sprite.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, so he kind of points us towards the exact spot we need to go to get Fabiana. And I like that Max is just like, okay, well, you're a cop. Like, why aren't you on this? You know she's abducted up there. He's like, there's basically an army of men who will kill me if I'm within 3 blocks of that place. Like, it would be pointless. But Max obviously can slip right in.
Well, he'll kill his way in.
Yeah. People have different methods. Some work more than others, you know. So
then your strip club gets raided by the guys that were mad that you went in there.
Mm-hmm.
But you get a gun from De Silva before he leaves, so you're able to take care of yourself.
Yeah, that was nice of him. That it was a little bit Deus Ex Machina of just like bumping into him and him being like, "Oh yeah, I have a spare pistol on hand. Here you go. Good thing you got robbed." Or rather, it's not so bad that you got robbed. But, you know, I guess it works. It's hard to tell what his level, the cop's level of involvement is at this point. Because, like, he definitely paints himself as just kind of like an uninvolved third party kind of examining. But he's very informed. Like, he's got photographs from, like, the handoff and stuff, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. It's kind of strange that he has those.
Yeah, like, I don't remember Max actually commenting on it, but I remember thinking, like, this is a little weird. Like, even for a cop, like, obviously he's going to be investigating and he's got access, but, like, some of this looks like maybe a little more inside knowledge than you would expect from him. But Max has a mission, so I guess there's not really any time to dwell on it.
So Max starts heading up the hill, and you fight your way through an army of guys.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but while you're still in the brothel, you run into that guy.
Yeah, this is like the most unmissable side conversation in the game, I would say, because it's literally just in an adjacent room on
and there's
the main
pills
hallway.
in there.
Yeah.
So you end up going in there usually. There's like pills in all of those rooms.
Yeah, it's nice. You get to stock up pretty effectively, but God, this guy's a scumbag. He's like a businessman on vacation. He comes here every year, he says, and he's like not even sure if the girls are legal.
Well, they're of legal age in Brazil.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's his defense.
Yeah. I like that Max just like stares him down and throws him the fuck out. Like, he's still definitely got that dad mentality of like, I have a little girl, so I'm not putting up with this shit. There's some disgusting fucking people in this game.
And so you work your way up the hill, and nothing really interesting happens on the way up. Is that how you feel? Like it's just combat?
Yeah. I mean, well, the one thing that I thought was, I guess, notable is like, there's kind of a gradient going from like the average townsfolk when you're lower on the hill to up into like full on gang territory. And I think the way you can observe that is by watching the windows of this town. It's actually like a really interesting detail they have where like, as you're walking by the homes of civilians, they'll like peek their head out of the window and then notice you and shut their blinds. Whereas the gangsters will just like start shooting out of them.
Oh, you do blow up a drug lab though. That does happen.
Oh yeah, Max takes a little bit of vigilante justice.
He's not subtle.
No, there's like, it's funny, there's fireworks there, which, earlier, there was like a
kid set one off to let everyone know to come kill you.
Yeah, it was a signal flare, essentially. Like, yeah, Max is here, everybody get your guns, essentially. And yeah, he uses one of those, fireworks to set off this explosive that is in the room where he just like ripped the gas out of the stove, and then this whole drug den burns down. Which that's probably that's gotta be bad for the environment of the area.
Yeah, and you know, that somebody did live there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
They probably weren't a nice person.
Yeah.
But that's real estate.
If I'm Max, I'm probably just going to assume that whoever lives there, is in on it.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting music in this segment as well.
Yeah.
Just like at the street party, there was some decent music.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get to the top of the hill, and it turns out that Marcello and Giovanna have beat you to it.
Yeah, this part really drove me crazy. Not in a way that was like the game wasn't doing anything wrong. It's just like, fucking come on, Marcel. He found out that you were on the way to get Fabiana, so he brings Giovanna with a big duffel bag of money, completely unarmed, into this basically lair. This is basically their headquarters of this gang. And he just kind of waltzes in, just being like, hey, I'll give you this money if you let me have my sister-in-law. That'll work out just fine, right? There's no way that this could go poorly for anybody involved. And it's a good idea for me to bring more people into the situation. So naturally you find them on their knees at gunpoint with the guys already sifting through the duffel bag of cash. Because why the fuck wouldn't they?
And then Max tries to get them to let everybody go.
Does he, though? Does he try? Or does he just kind of walk in and say, let her go?
And then he gets held at gunpoint by 4 people.
Yeah, it's weird. This part, I did not understand.
This is the one time I feel like Max is incompetent in a cutscene. You could do, most of the time, the things that you can do in game get carried over to the cutscenes.
Yeah. But here it's a very severe case of oh, come on, if you gave me control, I would have handled this easily. Yeah, he just walks into the room casually with his gun up, and he already knows there are people behind the doorway, around the corner. So naturally, when he walks out with his gun, there's already a dude with one to the back of his head.
I know. And you end up getting Fabiana killed.
Yeah, pretty swiftly. Yeah, she gets a bullet in her head. So things are...
And they take the money, and Giovanna and Marcel and leave. And then you're in shock, and we cut to a flashback.
Yeah, I guess this is as good a time as any for a little bit more Jersey action. And it kind of picks up a little bit after where, what was it, Chapter 4?
Chapter 4, yeah.
Yeah. Except it's cut ahead a little bit to Raoul and Max meeting at the graveyard so that he could say goodbye to his wife and daughter.
And this final goodbye gets interrupted by a bunch of greaseballs showing up to kill you because a bounty's been put on your head.
Are you Max Payne?
I thought he was Max Payne.
Yeah, it suits the game's nihilistic sense of humor perfectly. That the best piece of cover laying out before you when the cutscene ends and the gangsters start shooting at you is to duck behind the gravestone of your wife and daughter. Because you were kneeling there with saying your goodbyes. There's nothing else around you. The other graves are 5 feet apart. So if you're gonna avoid getting shot, you just duck behind that and hope that that'll absorb a few shots. And there's actually destructibility on it,
on almost all of them, really.
Yeah, when they shoot your wife and daughter's headstone, it crumbles, and I don't think it's the way Max wanted to leave things, but he didn't really have an option at that point.
And so, eventually, as you fight through this graveyard, you get captured by the mob boss.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember his name. It's not really important.
No, just the mob boss.
He's just really mad, and he hits people with shovels and makes you dig your own grave in classic mob boss fashion.
Yeah, of course. Your grave ain't gonna dig itself. It was actually, I would say, bordering on touching, seeing him grieving, though. He's literally, collapsed over with grief, and, he has to have... Yeah, he has to have an arm... he has to have each of his arms over, a henchman that's carrying him, essentially, out of the graveyard, because he can't bear.
And Passos, tries to soothe him, your son was killed in battle, a gun battle that he started.
Yeah, that's gonna make him feel any better. He bats him over the head with a shovel.
Yeah.
So then the worst part is Max has to dig 2 graves on his own. He doesn't even get any help.
Yeah.
But he's pretty crafty. I like the whole, like, shove some dirt into one guy's eye and then smash the other with a shovel trick. It was smooth. Some quick thinking for Max.
Does it seem like they didn't disarm Passos? Like, he got a gun really fast.
Yeah, I think his gun was, like, still on his person, which was weird. Like, I guess maybe you could argue the guy that got blinded by the dirt had one. He dropped it, and then Raoul picked it up from his feet, but they don't really articulate that. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, Raoul's got a gun.
And then you fight through the morgue, and you kind of work your way out of the cemetery and get to the phone.
Yeah, how did you feel about the combat scenarios in the cemetery?
The outdoor ones were a little less fun. The indoor ones were really good.
Yeah, there's actually, like, a lot more scripting going on in some of these sections than in probably your typical gunfight in this game. Because, like, there's the part where you actually get into the monastery, and you run to one side of the building, and then they come in after you searching, so you have to, like, fight your way back out. And there's, like, a sniper on the top floor and stuff. Like,
yeah.
It's relatively intricate, which is, I thought kind of interesting. Like, it feels like the mob is like it's probably slightly more organized than the Brazilian gangsters are in their combat tactics, though maybe not quite to the extent of, like, the paramilitaries.
Yeah. It's nice that they give you a lot of pills in this section. And
yeah.
It really helps with how there's a lot of cover, but it's still really open.
Yeah, it's weird though. The pills are all, cause like you're in a graveyard, there's not really a normal place where you would find pills. So they're all sitting in like what look like outhouses. Like I know they're basically like tool sheds, but they're just like wood huts. And they're like kind of at like some of the walkways alongside the graveyard. And I guess it's like where the groundskeeper would put his tools for like trimming hedges and stuff, but it's just weird to see like some painkillers in there. I guess maybe you
gotta have a good time at work.
Yeah. Take the edge off while you're moping around in the night.
So this is an okay segment. It's got a lot of one-liners.
Yeah.
Like, here this guy was working the graveyard shift literally.
I also appreciate the Raoul's bit about how the mortician doesn't have to walk very far to do his job.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually blanking on how this chapter ends.
You get to the phone in the office, and Raoul calls his buddy in Queens.
Yeah, you get Raoul's contact, that's right. Walking up to that office, that sniper engagement, I actually thought was pretty cool.
Where you have to kill him from the side?
Yeah, like, they've done this a couple times, or they've kind of, like, riffed on this concept of, like, having to, like, blind the sniper and that kind of thing, but here you're in the position of the runner and not the blinder. Like, typically it's like, oh, okay, shoot at the sniper so he has to, like, recoil away and you can get a chance to run up. But here, there's grunts on the floor while the sniper's up in his roost, so Raoul is dealing with the sniper while you have to, like, kind of advance your way up between the, like, safe spots that Raoul clears for you. I thought it was, like, kind of an interesting way of, like, having, like, a cooperative dynamic. And it's also, like, it works for Raoul's, like, kind of pitch of, like, them being, like, buddies, because up until this point, Max is, like, pretty much completely rejected Raoul, just being like, yeah, I'm just gonna lay low, like, I have no interest in taking his job. But as things get progressively worse and he has to rely more and more on Raoul, it kind of, like, solidifies why he would end up going with it.
Yeah. And, so, let's see, we end this chapter with the Call to Queens, and then we go back to Max being despondent with a guy yelling at him in the favela.
Yeah, it's literally right back to where we were before, like, in the room where Fabiana was shot, and he's staring down at her corpse while listening to this dude with a gun to his head yell at him.
And then Max gets mad because he doesn't speak the same language.
Yeah, it's funny how just, like, him ceasing to give a fuck at this point is enough to imbue him with the rage that, like, completely stuns the guy. He just, like, kind of, like, swats him away and grabs the gun. And then he doesn't even kill him. He just, like, pistol whips him a few times. Like, at this point, it's not even about efficiency. It's just about, like, getting something done. Like, he just wants to be able to look at one thing and say, like, I accomplished that, or I didn't fuck that up completely. So he's now pursuing Marcel and Giovanna, which gets complicated because you've got all of the cops showing up now.
Yeah, the cops are, like, just kind of taking people at random from this area.
Yeah, it's like a routine kind of raid. They make it sound like it's sort of like a show of force on the police's behalf, like not so much for any purpose other than just to say, like, yeah, there are still police in this city.
And you eventually have to fight them, and it's kind of frustrating because there doesn't really seem to be a reason why they would shoot you.
Yeah, I mean, they do make a point of, like, demonstrating that the cops are willing to shoot pretty much anybody. Like, even just, like housewives with their children in their arms and stuff are, like, running into their homes and locking the doors and shit because they know that basically anybody the rent-a-cops see is gonna get shot or abducted. So I guess just because, like, Max has a gun, he's especially a target. Because, like, there's not a way to, like, holster your weapon in this game. At least I don't think there is.
No.
Yeah, so... But they do... I don't know. This game's weird with stealth elements because multiple times it kind of alludes to the option of stealth without actually really allowing for it mechanically. And this is another example of that because the first time you see the rent-a-cops, like, up close, actually engaging an enemy... You can watch them from behind this, like, fence, and you can totally get into a gunfight with them through the fence. Like, you can start shooting at them, or you can just crawl past and completely circumvent that encounter. But then immediately after that, a cop, like, walks around the corner and you see him, like, face to face, and, like, all bets are off at that point. All the cops are aggroed to you. Like, there's no way to get through it without just frontal engagement. So, I don't know. I guess it's just not that kind of game, but I almost wish that, like, they wouldn't even, like, dance around it. Just be like, yeah, no, Max runs in and starts shooting them. Like, they engage him immediately instead of, like, kind of, like, alluding to it. I don't know.
And the cops are putting all the people they get into a paddy wagon, and they have Giovanna and Marcello.
Mm-hmm.
And you decide to follow the cops because they know where they're going, and you don't have a plan.
Yeah.
So the cops end up trading these people with the PMC you've been fighting all along.
Oh, yeah, there was that weird handoff. So it seems like they're on pretty good terms.
Yeah, there's handshakes and deals being done. They just kind of hand over the keys to the car, and the PMC drives off with them. Yeah,
and what they're doing with these people is, like, completely lost on us at this point. Like, it doesn't really make any sense. We end up navigating our way over to where Marcello and Giovanna are being held, but it's just barely too late. Like, you remember what the term for what they do to Marcello is?
No, but they've got him in a stack of tires that's filled with gasoline, and they just kind of set it on fire.
Yeah, you basically show up just in time to watch the match fall up against Marcel's gassed body.
And then there are quick time events, and they work really well in Max Payne, because they only use them when they're very visceral.
Yeah, it's weird though, like, has there been one up until this point?
Nope.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It really threw me for a loop, because we're now, like, 8 hours into this game.
And it's just like, let's do a quick time event where you kill a guy with a machete.
Maybe not 8, maybe more like
4.
5 or something. But yeah, it's a long ways in, and they just suddenly throw in, like, hit the shift key to stomp his leg out and stuff like that. It's weird. Honestly, I don't really feel like it adds much to the game personally. But I guess it kind of, like, hammers home the impact of the specific situation because of how rare they are. I can see where you're coming from with that. It's just like, Max feels like more the type just to fucking put a bullet in his head.
Yeah. But he's really upset right now. Because he can't even get, like, his secondary objective done.
True. Like, at this point, the only member of the family that's alive is the politician.
Yeah, Victor.
And he was like the one that you barely spent any time with. Like literally the only time you have a meaningful interaction with him is when you save his life in chapter 1. Other than that, he's just like in the same room as you occasionally.
So, let's see, you save Giovanna and you guys kind of take a nap on like a piece of concrete.
Yeah, it's like a sewage drain sort of thing almost. Like it goes into a canal. But it's like just enough cover that you can be out of sight and out of mind and rest for a while.
She explains that this killing is to make this look like it was just a regular gang thing, so no one cares what happened to all these people.
Yeah, the killers were from the PMC, but no one will be able to tell that after the fact because of the style they use. And, I mean, the brutality is pretty evident, so they're doing their job effectively if they're attempting to mask it, I would say.
So then we cut to the next morning, and Giovanna's throwing up all over, and you're trying to get Raoul to pick you up.
Mm-hmm.
And Giovanna explains that she's pregnant.
Yeah, she had been like... Giovanna's pretty freaked at this point. Like, she's like a humanitarian, and she's like... She works for charity organizations, that kind of thing. She's not really particularly exposed to, like, gang violence, or, like, PMC wars, or gunfights and that kind of thing. So when she is exposed to all this shit, it just comes across as like, oh, she's like a nervous wreck and she's vomiting. Then it turns out, yeah, she's actually pregnant with Raoul's child. So the stakes are upped pretty dramatically, I would say.
And then, so the PMC ends up finding you in this bus depot. Mm-hmm. And Giovanna just does not stay in cover, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah. It's weird because on one hand, she's surprisingly competent. Like, she actually gets a lot of shit done. You end up, like, there are parts where you're, like, boosting her up to have her, like, reach a switch or something, or, like, having her take control of something. But other times she's, like, completely disoriented by the gunfights.
Or just like, we gotta go, Raoul's probably here already, and then getting captured.
Yeah, she, like, runs way out of cover a couple times when there are, like, laser sights trained on her, and it's just like, oh my fucking god, please don't, you're going to die.
People are, like, this is one of those things where it's an escort mission, where there's not real tension, because she's not actually at risk most of the time, but,
yeah, most of the time she's doing really stupid stuff, it's in a cutscene. Like, I don't actually think it's... Okay, there's probably a couple times where it's possible for her to die, but only if you take a really long time during those moments where she's, like, caught at gunpoint with her hands up, and there's a guy approaching her, and you have plenty of time to shoot him before he sees you.
The tension is very artificial, but it works.
Yeah, I mean, the presentation is there, but, like, mechanically, it doesn't actually fundamentally change the way you're engaging with these shootouts. Like, it's probably for the best just because, like, one... logistically designing a whole other system for like having to like, I don't know, order her around, or even if it was just like she's kind of patrolling on her own and she runs the risk of getting shot, like that would just be frustrating as fuck. It would probably open up a can of worms that was not worth the payoff of like having a mechanically distinct section of the game.
So, eventually you're able to get a hold of Raoul, and you end up having to escape in an on-rails segment where Giovanna drives the bus, and you shoot because it's driver shoot sister.
Yep. Title drop.
And Max believes that he's probably better at shooting.
Yeah, although, I don't know, she's been able to handle herself pretty well at this point. I don't actually... Does she even know how to drive? Because she definitely articulates that she hasn't ever driven a bus, which is fair.
But it's also fair to assume she probably hasn't driven a car.
Yeah, I honestly don't know about that. I don't know what the driving situation is like there. Like, even in a lot of parts of America, it's just standard not to have a driver's license and just use public transportation. But I honestly can't say what the norm would be in that situation. But she manages well enough, except... Did it feel like the bus was going pretty slow to you, too?
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it's kind of artificially slow so that you can actually, like, have prolonged gunfights with people, because as you're being driven around, you're, like, hanging out the front door of the bus and, like, popping off shots at people passing by.
there's eventually you crash the bus into a building, because why not?
Yeah.
And Raul shows up, and you tell Giovanna to go see Raul and tell him to wait, you'll be up in a minute.
Well, he shows up in that, like, his helicopter's like a block away or something like that, but you don't even ever really get to see him. Like, he's just gone. And then he picks up Giovanna and takes off without you. He pretty much fucking hoses you completely.
And then you fight a bunch of Crusher Preto out of the back of the bus, and they're just showing up in, like, their commuter cars.
Yeah, this part was weird because I feel like they amplified your damage. Like, it felt like everybody was a one-hit kill. It's just kind of like this scenic moment of, like, 20 dudes charging at you, and you're just unloading on them from the bus. It was... I guess it was just kind of, like, hitting home how caught with his pants down Max is at this point. Like, he's got nothing to rely on. The one person that it felt like maybe he had his back up just ditched him in his helicopter.
It's kind of like the barn scene in Red Dead.
Yeah, it is actually a little bit similar to that. Just kind of like a Last Stand sort of thing, but Max ends up faring better.
Well, he has so many bullets.
Yeah, and so many pills and so much bullet time.
Yeah, have you figured out how you accumulate bullet time yet?
I assumed it was just based on kills.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It might just be bullets fired.
Okay, you can just shoot at any time when you're not in bullet time.
Maybe.
Yeah, I honestly, the meter, the HUD in this game is super minimalist, so, and the meter is like so far in the corner that like I don't notice it until I check every once in a while, and I'm just like, oh yeah, my meter's full again, I should probably use some bullet time.
Yeah, it's always either full or empty for me.
Yeah, although you can cancel it mid-use, which I do a lot. Like sometimes if there's somebody who's like moving in an erratic way, I'll just like quickly feather bullet time so I can get an easier shot on them, pull the trigger, and resume normal time. This is pretty much where we've got like no leads whatsoever. Like we ended up saving Giovanna, but that's like basically nothing compared to where we were even just yesterday, because yesterday Marcel and Giovanna were completely safe, and that duffel bag of money was in the possession of the Bronco family, and only Fabiana was missing. Now Fabiana's dead alongside Marcel, and then we managed to barely get Giovanna back with like some battered bruises.
Yes. And so you get picked up by De Silva again, and I experienced some loading issues here where his car was just empty.
Yes! Okay, it wasn't just me. This must have been something that happened with a patch of the game or something. Like, I thought that I had, like... Well, because, like, I alt-tab to, like, check something quick when this cutscene came up. I thought that that's what messed it up, because when I came back, I was rescued by his ghost, essentially. He drives up and he's talking to you, but there was nobody in there.
But he starts to tell you about how...
Raul's
on the Victor's payroll the whole time, and he's not actually your friend. And did he actually go to the police academy with you?
Yeah, he when he first greets you, he's like, "Oh, I remember you at the police academy." But Max is just like so out of it that he doesn't even
man.
Sure, okay, cool. It must have been a good time.
Such an age difference between them, it seems implausible.
Yeah, I would say Raul looks like he's like mid to late 30s, but Max is probably
early 50s or late 40s.
Yeah, I would say he's going on 50 at this point. Because even in the original two games, he looks like he's in his mid 30s. So at this point, he's getting there. But yeah, stuff isn't adding up with Raul. Like, he's known the Bronco family for much longer than he's told you. It's definitely suspicious, especially after you just got abandoned by him.
Yeah. And, De Silva reminds you of, Panama?
Yeah, what did he bring up again that triggered it?
Do you think you were just there to protect a woman?
Oh, yeah. And then we cut back to
Panama, which is after New Jersey, but before the main story begins.
Yeah, it's Max's second job with Raul after finally succumbing and accepting the deal.
And you're hanging out on a yacht with Marcelo, and he's having a good time.
Yeah, I think this is the first time Max meets a member of the Bronco family, actually.
And he gives Max a lot of crap.
Yeah,
It's really awkward.
it's pretty insufferable. Marcelo is like trying to get over like this girl that isn't into him.
I don't know like who that is. I think it might be Fabiana.
Really?
But it's like never brought up, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I just assumed it was just like some ambiguous, like lifelong thing of Marcelo's where he's just like, anytime he flirts with the idea of true emotional engagement, it burns him, so then he just goes back to being a ditzy party boy.
Well, he brings up this girl in the club in Chapter 2 as well.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's something I'm missing.
He does mention something about, like, I'm in love with a girl, but she doesn't love me back, or something like that. She doesn't think of me that way, something. So, yeah, he might be onto something. And, I mean...
He asks if you've ever loved a woman, and he's like, yeah, my wife, but she's dead. And he's like, good.
Yeah, it was extremely awkward. And Raul just silent, just, like, staring into his glass the whole time. It was pretty bad. And he, like... Marcelo, like, pulls Raul aside to give him a talking to about Max, because Max is too big of a downer for his boat party where everybody's on coke.
Yeah, he tells you to stay off the coke. Just kidding.
Yeah, he's a very lax boss.
And Max goes to take a nap because that's what Max does.
Especially before he's sober.
At like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, this is back when Max was in the honeymoon period of thinking this was going to be an easy set of jobs like Raul pitched it as, but it is quickly apparent after he wakes up from his nap and finds the boat deserted except for some gunmen, that that's not the case.
Yeah, and that's where we'll pick up next week, where we will be finishing the game.
Yeah, playing to the end. How many chapters are left?
It has 14 chapters, I think, so there's probably only 4 left.
Yep, 4 chapters. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I thought that this was a strong section mechanically. There weren't any more of those, like, restrictive camera issues I had in some of the previous sections. Like, I was worried the bus was gonna have more of that, like getting shot from areas you couldn't target. But it ended up going really smoothly, actually.
And, I mean, the plot didn't progress all that much.
It just kind of dissolves more. Like, everything that was functioning is no longer.
This is definitely one of those games where it comes together as you put the final puzzle piece in.
Yeah, at this point, Max has really nothing to hang on to other than the vague idea that pretty much everybody he thought was on his side is either dead or was never on his side to begin with.
So, we're going to be moving our Max Payne multiplayer meetup to December 30th?
Yeah, so, we're not all going to be able to do the multiplayer meetup tonight, unfortunately. Tonight, as of recording, as of release, this will be in the past, but we're still going to be popping on to play with people. We're just also going to be having the full multiplayer meetup shindig on the 30th. So, if you were interested, if you have a copy of Max Payne on PC and wanted to play along with fans of the show and fans of the game, you're still going to have an opportunity to. Next Friday, like Greyson said, December 30th, 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. So yeah, we would love to see you all online. It's a fun time. It's a good game for multiplayer.
If you have any questions or suggestions for us, write into sharewarepodcast@gmail.com, and you could be entered for a chance to win Uplink on PC from Brent.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Until then, this has been Josh.
And this has been Greyson.
Thanks for listening.
Hi everyone, it's your favorite co-host here, host, I don't know if I'm a host or a co-host, it's Brett. I just want to let you know, I edited the episode, and it was really hard. I'm glad it was a very short episode. I hope you liked that Favela song, because I had to listen to it on my headphones to make sure it wasn't all fucked up. And that meant that I had to listen to pounding fucking Favela music at 5 in the goddamn morning after having fever dreams about DMX all night. So, that was pretty rough. I'm not gonna lie. That was some tough stuff. Real tough stuff. This is a very short episode because I was sick and I bring all the content. I say What the fuck? My headphones just turned off. Okay, well, that's not important. What's important is we don't have an ending bit for this one. So I thought I would talk and I would be funny. I can't, though. I can't be funny because I'm just not funny right now. What I am is very sick. This is Christmas Eve, 7 a.m. now. I've been working on this for like 2 hours. If anything is fucked up in this, there are two things you have to know. One, I'm editing while sick as fuck. Two, we used a new normalizing program that is supposed to take out a lot of the editing process. So if it fucked up, like I listened to it, it all seems fine. But if something gets fucked up on SoundCloud, it's not my fault. I'm a good person. People like me. Shout out to Jacko for making me a drink that consisted of gin, Jack Daniels, and Coors Light. You might be the reason I'm dead. You know, like if I don't make it to the next episode of Shareware, if I don't make it to the next year, it's probably your fault. I don't even know how long I've been going on about this, but I hope you enjoyed Shareware. Whatever. Fuck. Yeah, have a good one. I'm gonna go play Rocket League really poorly.